Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell. This week, for episode 29, I have James Ditty joining me to share his story about military service, addiction, and how drums and energy work saved his life. Thank you, and I hope you'll enjoy. Welcome to the Energetic Psyche, hosted by yours truly, Dr. Adrian Campbell. This week, for episode 29, I have James Ditty joining me to share his story around his military service, his difficulties with addiction, and how drums and energy work saved his life. So a little bit about James. James is an Army veteran, shamanic practitioner, energy worker, and artist. He is a self-styled Western mystic who sees clients for healing work and facilitates sacred medicine experiences. James, thank you for joining us. I so appreciate your presence.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So cool. Let's start with where do you come from? Where's home?
I was actually born and raised in Tonganoxie, just about 20 minutes here from outside Kansas City.
Oh, okay. Right on. Right on. And when did you join the Army? How old were you?
So I graduated high school in 1986 and I had an academic scholarship. So, I think coming from a small town, and, small high school, I lacked a whole bunch of skills necessary to succeed at college. So at the end of the year, I had a whole bunch of incomplete grades and Fs, and I lost my scholarship. And about that time, the Army recruiter called me, and he said, "Hey, have you given any thought to what you're going to do with the rest of your life?" And I said, oddly enough, my dance card's open. So, what do you have? And that's what happened. So I joined in 1987.
Gotcha. Okay. And how long did you serve for?
So I started off as a reservist. I did basic and AIT as a reservist. And then, I don't know, about 6 months later, I went active duty. And then I transitioned out in late 94. So 7 years, almost 8 years, 7 years and 8 months, something like that.
Okay. All right. What was your service like?
Typical through the late 80s and early 90s, it was all Cold War military, right? So we never really saw any kind of combat. I think I don't know, because I, of course, haven't been in the military now, but I think a military that's deployed is a lot different than a peacetime military that's just that was a numbers game then. So, but it was pretty good. I ended up as a flight medic for about 3 of those years, which was awesome. For a combat medic in peacetime, that's about the best you can get, because you're actually working in your craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I was stationed in Alaska, and they had something that was called Military Assistance to Safety and Traffic. So we were in Fairbanks, Alaska, and we gave support to the highway systems and highway patrol and the people living in remote areas, or truckers on the Dalton Highway. Probably about 95% of what we actually flew were civilian casualties and just all sorts of stuff. So yeah, it was an exciting time.
So honestly, that's a lot of what my Coast Guard duty was like up in Alaska.
Yeah. Oh, you were.
We were on. My ship was a 378, and we went up to the Bering Sea, and I used to joke that we were basically a helipad for our helicopter that would go out and do all the SAR cases and lift the guys off the boats, and or bring us injured. We played temporary hospitals, so if it was too rough to get them all the way inland, they'd drop them at us, and our doc would do the best he could to keep them good enough until we could get them to a hospital. And mostly civilian casualties, and just dealing with all of that. Yeah.
Wow, that's that's cool. Yeah, it is. It was exciting. We did the same thing, search and rescues for bush planes were down.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a ELT going off, then we would launch and try to find it. And it was definitely adrenaline fueled, So for a bunch of young kids that were 25 and younger, there were only 4 of us that was all that was on duty. So, and we were pretty highly trained. We passed courses that a lot of doctors and nurses couldn't pass. But because we were so remote, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was very good to train at that level, right? Because we were either on duty or we were training for the next duty, and it was, yeah. I think all of us sort of had a little bit of a Jesus complex, right? But
That's interesting. I've been doing ride-alongs for my upcoming research with first responders and having conversations a lot about complexes and archetypes showing up in first responders. And the Cape complex is one that I've heard a lot. And I look a lot at like the archetypes of the hero, but then also like archangel archetypes that show up, like Archangel Michael in specific for the military. And then, the Jesus complex. Tell me what you mean by that.
well, so when you're on a short final on a remote stretch of highway, and it's cold and dark, and there's 20
Mhm.
people congregating on the highway, they don't really know you,
Right.
but all they know is you're there to solve their problem,
Yeah.
right? And so, I've had runs where I land, and it's just general kind of chaos, right? People
Mhm.
milling around, and then my patient or my pack. And I had a trooper one time say, "Well, you just give me a minute. You need to stand over there." And I looked at my crew chief, and we just got done playing racquetball, right? So we were kind of tired and sweaty anyway. And I said, "Okay." I said, "You see that helicopter?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You got about 2 minutes to put me on my patient, or I'm climbing back on that. We're going home."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Oh." I said, "So get these people out of the way. Get out of my way." I mean, it's just like this, and yeah. So I don't know if it was like a power trip or a control trip or what, but I knew that I was very good at what I did. I knew that my crew was very good at what we did, and that they really didn't have any other options than us, right? So,
Right.
and that's just kind of, because it was like the whole purpose of my life was to train for that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
mean, that's why I was there. And so, when the beeper would go off or the phone would ring at 2 a.m, I would go from a sound sleep to wake up with a 110 pulse rate, and it was like this laser focus. We're on now,
Mm-hmm.
and I missed that when I got out, I think.
I think many of us do. It's a very different way of living. I was just sharing a story with somebody. My first ship, I slept against, like on my ship. I was on two different ships, but they were the same size and everything anyway. And we had two diesel engines and we had two jet turbines. And I slept against where the turbines were. And so I'd be sleeping and I'd hear the turbines come up, which meant we were about to go very fast. And as soon as I heard that high pitched whine, I'd wake up and be like, here we go. And you're out of your rack and you're in your boots and you're in your coveralls and you're heading wherever you need to go, even before they make, the pipe or the announcement of what's going on. Like, you're ready. And when you get out, it's slow. It's just different. And like that complex you're talking about, that level of importance and knowing you're important and knowing you matter, or that you matter in that moment, it does fade when you don't have a path for your purpose. Because I like to say it's not that we lose our purpose, but that we lose our path. Because I think who we are is always who we are.
Yes.
But for us, the military gives us the path to do that work. And when we no longer have the military, it's about finding our path again.
Yes, I struggle a lot because I just when I transitioned out and I got in the civilian world, I felt like I've been responsible for life and death.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I loved it when somebody would lecture me about the responsibility of coming to work on time, or not being late for work, or whatever. And I thought to myself, I'm sure you think that that's a responsibility. I mean, it is a responsibility, but it was never
Mm-hmm.
priority list. And then I don't know. I think after years of being on call like that, because we were on for a week and then off for a week and then on for, and that's just how it was, right? So it was kind of a constant state of readiness.
Right.
And you get used to that. You get used to that adrenaline, right? I mean, you get
Mm-hmm.
juice, and when you don't have the juice, you find other ways. I found other ways, right?
So let's talk about that. What was your transition like? When you got out of the military? Where did you go next?
Well, so I could have drawn unemployment, but it was like $231 a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had a wife and 3 kids, and I was actually getting a divorce. And so I went. You had to apply for jobs, and this was back when you actually had to apply, fill out a sheet, and so I went and applied for a job building fences. It was a construction job, but I'd had experience of that in my childhood. And so the guy said, he said, "What do you need to make?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to make $230 a week unemployment. So if you can't beat that, there's no point." And so he beat it, right? Not by much, but he beat it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I did that for probably 15 or 18 years. I worked either for myself as a contractor or working for other people. It was a good trade, but it's also a young person's trade, right?
Yeah. Why did you get out of the military?
Why did I what?
Why did you leave the Army?
So it was 93, 4, 5. I don't know. President Clinton was doing the drawdown, and so they opened it up to all sorts of MOSs, and I think they wanted to drop like 50,000 people or something the first year. And in the first 90 days of application, they had like 150,000 people had put in for it. There were severance packages and all that, right?
Right.
And so what I found with people transitioning out, there were people that were maybe, I wouldn't say less qualified, because ultimately the qualification is the rank, right? So if you have the rank, that maybe their decision making maybe they weren't as grounded in good decisions, and it just started turning into a political mess, and like I was no longer interested in it. And I was sort of at that 8-year mark, and I figured if I did 10, then I had to do 20.
That's how I was. I got out at 6 because I was like, if I do another 4 and I hit 10, I know I'll stay. And I just didn't want that for myself.
That's funny. And so that was the thing for me. And I was trying to look at what that 10 to 20 year mark would look like, and I couldn't tell how the military was going.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I think I'll just take that $5,000 severance and just get on out. And
right on.
That's what I did.
Right on. Okay. And then you went to build fences.
Yeah. Or whatever. Making money.
Right on. And so what did life look like for you upon your transition?
Well, like I said, I got out. I got a divorce. I was my father passed away like the last year I was in the military, and I did not grieve that well, right? So I came back, and I immediately got back on the duty roster, and everybody's like, "Well, you shouldn't do that." And I was like, "Oh no, I think I have to do this," And so really, I think it was a grief process that kind of spiraled me out of the military, and it was sort of the catalyst for me to put in for a divorce, and then what you said earlier about not having a purpose was very much true, because I'm drifting now, right? Like I'm not focused. I don't really have anything to be responsible to, and then missing that adrenaline. Of course, me being me, I found amphetamines, and they were that was a good feeling, right? I mean, so and that kind of started off as a tool, because you don't get tired, and you do a little more work, and you don't really get hungry, and then and I think for a lot of people that start using amphetamines, that's how it is, right? It starts off as a daddy or mommy's little helper, and then the rub of it is, before it's over with, that's all you're going to do is amphetamines. Right? Like you're really not going to do anything else. That's going to consume your life. So at least that was part of my arc. But
well, and I mean, like you said, you think it was the part of the grief spiral that led you into it, and drugs are one of the ways that we self-medicate, including alcohol as a drug, right? Like any way we can alter our consciousness through outside means is a way that we self-medicate and deal with the symptoms that are coming up, because we don't know how to get to the root cause, or we're not ready to see it. We're not ready to be there. Yeah. So go ahead.
No, please go on.
No, so I know from our previous chat that, your journey with amphetamines lasted for quite a while before you were able to find your sobriety. So what was that like? And what was it like moving into the recovery process?
Well, so, as far as the addiction process, I'm going to say that there's all sorts of stages of addicts, right? I mean, there's full blown addicts and junkies and responsible users and binge users and highly functional addicts. And I've literally been every single one of those at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get out there a little bit too far, and I would kind of quit for a while and reel it in, and then I would try to start responsibly or recreationally. So I don't know. It just got to the point. And for me, I like to say that I had an epiphany or something that shook me out of it. But the reality of it was probably about 22 or 23 years, right? And I just, I remember thinking in the 19th year, I was like, I don't think this is fun anymore, right? So,
Yeah.
and then it just got to the point, I'd started a spiritual awakening in 2005. So they overlapped there for a while. And then it got to the point where following my spiritual path, I realized, okay, so I'm not going to go any further. I can't go any further and hold on to this addiction piece. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I just kind of gestated and percolated with that for a while. And really, I don't think, at that point in time, my drug habit probably cost $20 a week. Right. So
Okay.
Considering everything I had been prior to that, I don't really think that was I'm not going to justify it and say it's good, but $20 a week is way better than $300 a week. And there was a point in time after 20 years of amphetamine use that I found that if I didn't have it for 10 or 12 days, that I would have a problem, completing a sentence, or I would stutter and stammer. Like I noticed it,
Right.
And then so I would just get a little bit back in my system, and everything would seem to be fine, right? And of course, that could.
That's a long time to be using.
Yeah, it is a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know how much would come back, but I will say it's good that like I can taste food again, right?
Right on. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah, because I hadn't for years, right? So, I don't know exactly what it does to the brain, but I mean, you eat food, but you really don't have the sense of having the pleasure of the taste of the food, right? So,
that's depressing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
well, I guess if the chemicals are in there, it's making you. I mean, I'll be honest. I've never done amphetamine, so I have no idea what that experience is like.
Good for you. You're not.
Yeah, I'm boring. I'm a little bit. I've been a stoner, and I've drank, but that's about it. That's about it for me. And my brain's and my mind, my psyche is wild enough on its own. I don't need to encourage it in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started a spiritual awakening, and that's what led you to start moving away, because you realized that you were at a point where you couldn't continue on with this path, the new spiritual path you were moving along, and continue being an addict.
Yeah, I don't know that the spiritual path actually led me away from it, because I was, I think I was handling both, but I had like cubby holes, right? So here's my path, and this is the other stuff that I do. And then as I integrated the spirituality, I had that realization that I couldn't hold on to the other thing too. And then I really started looking at it, and I was like, okay, so it's not serving a purpose, right? I mean, there's no purpose to it. There might've been a purpose to it a long time ago. Good, bad, or indifferent. It was probably serving a purpose, but it no longer served a purpose. And I got thinking, well, I don't need it. I don't have a craving for it. I mean, that sort of desire, it sort of ran its course. So, and then so it was August 2015 when I was like, yep, that's it. I'm done. And I never said that I was done before. I've always said that I need to slow down, or I have other priorities, and then I'll have to come back to this. But I actually said, yep, that's it. I'm done. And it was, I thought it would be a little bit rough, but it wasn't. So the universe blessed that transition.
So you're coming up on 9 years.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Glad you're here.
Thanks. It's, you grow into it, right? I see addicts in recovery for the first 2 or 3 years, and it really is. I think it's sort of the wealth of their memories or their experiences. So the things they have to talk about, when you're freshly clean, it goes back 3 or 4 years when you weren't clean, right? So, And I think that can be a trigger for a lot of people.
Mm.
You know, and I mean, I just quit. So I didn't really do the 12-step program. I mean, I've seen people in 12-step and I've talked to them, and I would always hear them say, and, you know, I hope I don't offend anyone because I never read this 12-step book, but I hear them say two things, right? Some people are sicker than others, which I agree with, right? And then I hear them say, once an addict, you're always an addict, right? Which I agree with that too, but actually what I heard them say and what it felt like they were saying was they're giving themselves an okay or a license to fall off the wagon in the future, right? You know, so they were kind of prepping the way to, well, you know, I'm an addict, so if I get drunk, can't really blame myself. And so I really started thinking about that, you know, a year or two before I got clean, and I realized that I think addiction is an archetype, right? I mean, I think an addictive personality, you're an addict, and I truly am an addict. If I go bowling on Wednesday at Cosmic Bowling and I have fun, I'm probably going to go next Wednesday, right? And before long, if I'm having a good time, I'm going to go every Wednesday, and then I'm going to try to push that envelope, and then I might start going on Fridays and see what that's like.
Right.
And so I realized as part of my spiritual path and doing all that integration that, you know, because it really is shadow work, right? I mean, you have to figure out all these things and you know, we all have things we don't like or so much about ourselves, right? Or some things we're very proud of and some things that, but to me, the shadow work was just integrating that, right? Whether I'm proud of it or not, it's part of me. And I, you know, I think that self-love comes in there, right? Which is a whole nother. I spent about a year and a half in meditation on the word love and what it means. And
it's a biggie. I just hosted a retreat this past weekend, and I was sharing about a really difficult time in my life where I wasn't sure. Well, I just didn't know what the fuck to do. I'll be totally honest. I was really, really struggling, and I was like, okay, at the end, like I went back to my spirituality. My spiritual practice is like what gave me my anchor. And I was like, I just need to figure out how to show up. And if I can connect to that, then no matter what, I know I'm making the right decisions. And my choice was like, I just want to be love. And so like everything I encountered was like, okay, what would love do? What would love do in this situation? If I'm showing up as love, what would I say? How would I react? And I mean, you know, now I have more complex thoughts, but for a while when life was hard, like that's what got me through, you know, is because I think it's so much more powerful than we give it credit for. And it is absolutely worthy of a year and a half of meditation and even more than that.
Well, you know, so if you ask 100 people what love is, you're going to get 150 answers. Yeah. Right? And I, you know, I don't know. And, you know, I'm not, I would like to say I'm introspective, but I'm not exactly educated. Right. So I haven't studied a lot of this stuff. It's just,
I don't think you need to be educated to be introspective. One is a way of being and one is a process.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, I was always that kid that I wanted to figure things out for myself anyway. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I truly think that it doesn't matter, like your truth or what's relevant to you is not necessarily what's relevant to me. Right. I just kind of sat and percolated and gestated with all this and let it marinate. Right. And, yeah. And, you know, I don't know. I think, for me anyway, I think love is just sort of, it's not really an allowance or except it's just kind of looking at things as what is, right? And so, you know, a year and a half of contemplating this, and then I read a quote from the Dalai Lama that said, "Love is the absence of judgment." And I was like, why can I, like, you know, not attempt
because you had to go through it. You had to learn on your own, and you had to find your own connection and your own meaning. And that phrase could have meant something completely different to you in the beginning of that year and a half than it did at the end.
But, you know, I think I wouldn't have noticed it because, but it'd been in my mind and you know, I'm sitting around the house in silence and listening to dogs snore and just sort of doing that mind exercise and chasing it down. And so, you know, I applied that to myself. So I think that was really the basis of my shadow work, right? It's like, so, you know, I have these pieces that, had maybe not been the most beneficial or positive thing for me, but they're still my pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you can love part of something but not the other thing. I don't truly think that's love, right? And I see couples do that in relationships now. Well, I love him, but there's a couple things I would change about him, or
Anytime there's the
but I wish he wouldn't do this. And
yeah.
I tell him, I'm like, no, that's not how it works, right? So if you love him, the things that annoy you or not, right? You just have to say that's part of them and just let that be, right? And kind of let that annoyance go. Because
or
really
accept it and pull it in close. I love him, and it annoys the shit out of me, or when he does this.
right. Yeah.
It's not a but, it's an and, right? Like you're accepting them and loving everything about them, even if it annoys you. It's okay. You're allowed to be annoyed, but that doesn't mean you don't love them.
And so the real shadow work is when you start loving them, right?
Mm-hmm.
For those things that annoy you,
right.
Because that's the difference, right? I mean, that's the uniqueness. That's, because we're all special.
Yeah.
But nobody's special, but we're all special, right?
right.
And so it's those sort of differences that I think that's where the real excitement is, right? I mean, that's where
they're going to annoy you in a way that no one else ever could.
Right.
Exactly, because you two are meant to be annoyed together about that and in that way.
And that's what you'll miss when they're gone.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's funny because we're talking about like romantic couples, but it reminds me of like my brothers and sisters. So I'm the oldest of 6. Okay. And I'll see like memes and reels and whatever online of like siblings. And I saw one the other day and it was like someone that didn't have brothers and sisters. And they're like, well, what's it like to have siblings? And both the people around them just start laughing. And then they just like pull their hair and throw stuff in their food and eat their French fries and like pick their nose and like all of this terrible shit. And they're like, what the hell? And they're like, welcome. That's what it's like to have brothers and sisters. And I'm like, right? And it's so weird, but like, I miss that. And just like military, right? There's some of the worst shit I miss. Like sleeping together in puppy piles during refuel because you couldn't leave the flight deck in case there was an emergency, but you're out there for hours and hours and hours. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. You're in your refuel gear, but there's something lovely about doing it at the same time that you miss.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so we are talking. I mean, we're using an example of romantic couples, but I think you can apply that concept of love or what we're talking about to like all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You can apply it to interpersonal relationships, but you can definitely apply it to yourself. And so I sort of just kind of instinctually did my shadow work. I just unpacked everything and looked at all the bones and skeletons and some of them, there are some things, some parts of my shadow that I really like,
Mm-hmm.
I really think there are some things that might be a little bit on the darker side. Some people would say it's on the darker side, but you know what? I love the fact that my nature, right?
Not all shadow elements are bad. It just means they're out of our conscious awareness.
Right.
And as we bring them forward, just like you did, it's like you look at it and you're like, okay, how am I feeling about this? Like, how can I get to a place, at least tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you were saying, like, how am I going to get to a place where I can love and accept this about myself?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, and I'd been to counseling and, like if you go to a therapist or you have a psychological exam, it's horrible, right? Because there's nothing in the DSM-4R that says normal, right? There's always a condition.
Because normal is like this, like fallacy. It's like there's always this normal person. Where do they live? Where I have never ever met one in my life. So yeah.
I looked when it was the DSM-3, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find a normal diagnosis in there, right? So but going through therapy and you're a borderline or you're bipolar, and like I sort of had that realization that years ago, somebody that was maybe ADD, there was a value for them in the workplace because they were multitaskers.
Right.
Or, maybe people that had a little bit of OCD or maybe considered to be meticulous. And so there was a value for that. Right. And I didn't, because a lot of times in therapy, in clinical therapy, they sort of set that up and carve off pieces of you and tell you that it's wrong. Right. And this,
the example I always give is that there's a box and this is normal.
Right.
And they're going to shove you in there, and then whatever doesn't fit, they just try and carve off with either behavioral conditioning or drugs, right? But I also want to take a minute and just pause. As someone with a PhD in psychology, with many friends who do the work, they are not all terrible and not all shitty.
No, I know.
But there's a lot that are. And so you got to work to find the person that works for you. But the DSM, the general psychology community, insurance companies, they're the box and cutting off the edges. Like, it's just what they force upon too many therapists.
So, I was very lucky. My therapist was new. And
I don't think I've ever heard that in my life.
No, he was new, and he got, we were in family therapy for my kids and me. And I kind of felt bad for that guy because we're fairly intelligent and we remember what you say and we'll throw your words back at you. But I saw him for about 4 years for anger management and other things. And I didn't know until 2 years into it. He finally told me what cognitive behavioral therapy was. And I said, so what's that? And he said, well, we just sit around and talk about stuff. I said, well, wait a minute. If that actually works, then why do I got to come see you? Right. And he said, well, like some people need people to talk to. I said, well, I don't need anybody to talk to. He said, well, it kind of helps direct thoughts. And I said, well, yeah, I can kind of direct my thoughts. So really, after my time with him, I just sort of took that same, I talked to myself, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, the things I worked through, I either did it as I use Facebook as like a blog, or, I just had conversations with myself in my head and
Carl Jung did the same thing. There's a whole book published about it now where he talked to himself, was exploring his dreams and his thoughts. And that's where the majority of all of his deepest theories came from. It
worked for me. So
yeah.
I can't, but like I hear people talk about shadow work now, and it's, I don't know. I think maybe I don't have the understanding of it, but they talk about, rectifying that or overcoming their shadow. And I think that's I don't think that's actually accurate. I think it's just an integration. And you were right before.
I agree.
It's what I think the shadow does is it causes actions like addiction or whatever. That's a compulsion, right? So you can't control it. You don't know why you do it. You do this thing, given the right circumstances, you're going to respond this way. You don't really like it, but you don't know why you do it. That to me is that shadow, and that's that compulsion. And so I think the whole point of shadow work is just to get an awareness that even if the awareness is only that given these three factors, this, and this, every time I'm going to do this, right? If it's that awareness.
Awareness is key. It's like in everything I teach and everyone I work with, first step, awareness. Because without it, what else is there? You have no idea what's going on.
I think that's the whole point of the spiritual path and enlightenment. I think it's only awareness, right? So if it's 1, 2, 3, and then this, and you don't want this, you just make sure you don't get 1, 2, and 3, right? You can have 2 and 3, you can have 1 and 3, and then it becomes awareness. So I don't know. I kind of, and the point of that is I looked at that addictive piece of my personality, and I said, okay, so if I have this and I'm not going to overcome this, then maybe I should harness that and put that to use in a good way, right? Because as long as it's a compulsion, right, and it's the shadow, and then it's more than likely our compulsions don't do good things for us, right? There's not a positive outcome for that. But if you can harness that up and harness that energy up and say, okay, so I've been addicted to this, which is not good for me. I want to put the same level of commitment and energy, right? I want to put that work for something that I either enjoy or it is good for me or beneficial, or I want to learn something, or, and to do that.
So that's the perfect example perfect example of beautiful shadow work, because the compulsion, right? The complex, that's the unconscious part of it. That's the shadow that you can't see it. It's shadow, not because it's bad, but because it's in the darkness.
Right.
And then you shine light on it, you become aware, and now you get to choose how you're going to respond to this part of you versus that part of you taking control.
Right.
Beautiful example. Yeah.
Right. And and it's that choice for so many things, so in my words, I call that taking your power back. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Either in energy work or spirituality or that and these days I don't see anything as being different. Right. There's not a spiritual side and there's this side. I mean, it's all sort of blended and integrated, because I think everything is sort of like a hologram. Right. Everything is a reflection of the other thing.
It is. It's deep, right? But it's true. Like, I think it's so difficult for so many of us to be able to move into that meta view. But when you can, you start to see that there's no separation. There's no difference. We are all connected. Like, I teach my energy classes and I tell people it's all energy. We're all energy. We're all bound to each other. And I know that even as I speak the words, it's not possible for me to really imbue the full meaning of what I'm saying. Like, I see energy, right? So, I see it as a huge ocean.
Mm-hmm.
We're all touching each other all of the times. Like, everybody's connected to everything all of the times. So there is no separation. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And we're all relatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear people talk about saving the earth and I personally think that's like the height of hubris, right? So, we are fruits of the earth, just like trees and apples and vegetables and the other. We are fruits of the earth, right?
Right. Right. We are nature.
Yeah. Mother Earth's the 9th or 10th dimensional being. She really doesn't need us. She can turn back into a snowball for 10 million years and start all over again, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, I kind of, that's kind of where I lean these days. Is I want to focus on that connection and relationship, because I think that's what's missing for a lot of people, right?
Right.
And it's since my sobriety, I was absolutely right. Since I laid that down, I just kind of. I was at a sticking point. I couldn't go any further, and then I laid that piece down, and it's just it's blossomed from there. So, but I think people struggling with addictions or struggling with I think there's a spiritual piece to mental health issues too, right?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
I really think as soon as medicine gets hip to the idea that we have to get mind, body, and spirit all on the same page. And here in the West, typically it's not that. You mentioned earlier, right? So, we're gonna. They tried to medicate me when I was in therapy, and I said, yeah, I don't know. I said, I've done quite a few street drugs, and I don't think you have the good one out there. They said, well, these are different. I said, well, yeah, those are brain drugs, right? You're changing my brain chemistry. That's bad. At least for street drugs, we know what the side effects are, right?
we know to expect. We know what this is going to do. Yeah.
This is known, right?
Yeah.
And Abilify was a very new thing, and I said, yeah, I don't want to take that. And so what I set out to do, and told them that I was interested in learning coping skills. I didn't want to medicate, because I didn't see any difference between taking, and I'm not like, I know medication helps people, right. But for me, I did not see any difference between taking that pill every day or going to get my fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I sort of wanted to move away from that. But in the East and in other places, they do realize that mind, body, spirit connection, and so they try to treat all three things.
Because there is no separation. Just like we were talking about the world and energy and all of that, like even within us, we are not like these discrete components where it's like, oh, there's a soul over here and
Right.
you got to treat that. And then there's the brain over here and you got to treat that, and this, like, everything is connected, and someone can, like, their physical form will wither away and die if their soul is not fed.
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of, here lately, as part of that Western mystic thing. I get stuck on topics, and I might dwell on them for a year or two. And
Yeah.
So for the last year and a half or so, I've been considering what is the universal consciousness, and that I voice, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
your voice sounded the same when you were 4 as it does now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an ageless thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I speculated that I can't know what yours sounds like, but I know what mine sounds like. But what if? Just what if? Right? Because we can't perceive it, right?
Sure.
I can't perceive mine. I can't perceive yours. But what if? It's exciting to think. What if it sounds the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if we're all just? What if we're not that individual in the stream of consciousness, right?
Right.
Or maybe we are slightly individual, but there's an overarching universal consciousness that connects us all. Maybe there's not 7 billion people. Maybe there's 7 billion figures or avatars, right? But there's one consciousness. So, and we're having 7 billion different scenes, right?
Yeah.
I know it's a little weird, but
No. So I'm a Jungian. I study Jungian psychology, which is all about the collective unconscious, universal unconscious. And I'm an energy worker, for crying out loud.
So it doesn't sound weird.
No, it's in one of the books I wrote. Are you kidding me? Like literally in my the Dreamer's Companion book, there's an entire, I think, 3 pages that breaks down the universal unconscious, the cultural unconscious, and the personal unconscious, right? And how each of those plays out. And the metaphor that I like to use is to imagine the collective or universal unconscious is like the ocean. Mm-hmm. Okay. The cultural unconscious would be like a bay or a harbor. And then the personal unconscious is going to be a tide pool.
Nice.
We are all different, but we are all connected and we are all the same.
Right.
And what happens in the ocean is going to get to that tide pool. And what happens in that tide pool is going to affect the ocean at a smaller rate, at a slower rate, probably. But we're all connected and we are all the same. So yeah, no, I don't think what you're saying is crazy at all. I 100% am on par with you. Yeah.
That's cool. I feel better about it. Maybe.
There are many books written about this, James. Have you dug into Carl Jung's psychology at all?
No, other than, maybe I read a quote here and there, and then I would ponder on the quote and try to see if I can make sense of it. But, Facebook and social media is great for that, for quotes, but there's a lot of misquoted stuff. And my pet peeve is the Gandhi quote that says, "Be the change that you wish to see," right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is not exactly what Gandhi said at all, but
what did he say? What's the right one?
I'd have to look it up, but look it up. It was a piece of there was a paragraph, right? And they consolidated be the change you wish to see.
I feel like I've heard this before, actually.
This quote.
Yeah. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you're interested in exploring Carl Jung's theories on the collective unconscious, universal unconscious, his a really book that kind of covers all of his is his memoir, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections by Carl Jung. He wrote it, I think, in his 80s before he passed away. And then there's another one that I like called The Essential Jung. And it kind of just breaks down like a chapter on each of his main theories, which is nice.
I'll have to check that out. About 6 months ago, Krishnamurti came across my radar, and I tried to consume that. And he has some. I think that was probably one of the greatest intellects of our time, right, of our age.
Who is it? Who did you mention?
Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Okay. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that name.
Extremely intellectual guy, but I think it was mostly intellect based, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of this stuff, has to be theoretical, because we can't prove it. It's one of the reasons that Jungian psychologists are talked about as fringe psychology. We're out there on the edges with the weirdos. Yeah. Because we're like spirit and energy and dreams. And they're like, this is not science. And we're like, it is science. And they're like, it's not. You're insane. We're like, but it is.
Carl Jung experimented with some altered states of consciousness too, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. Yeah. He did all kinds of cool shit. He did some, like I said, a lot of his work is the foundation for so much in this space. And, you know, one of the things I really liked about him is that he's explored different areas of belief. Like he wrote up an entire thing on the I Ching. He explored yoga. He explored physics. I mean, he was kind of all over. And, you know, I've always kind of had these beliefs on my own. Right. And then when I started grad school at Pacifica, which is a Jungian-based institution, I just remember being like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like somebody else believes all this stuff that I've like somehow like known in my heart, but had never seen written down. Yeah.
Well, he sounds fun compared to Freud, right?
Well, they were besties and then they broke up.
Really?
Yeah. Because he was more fun, I guess. No, because Freud didn't believe in the collective unconscious. He thought we were all like an island to our own, and that the majority of our development happened in our childhood. And Jung was like, no, we're all connected. Dreams are a huge part of our development and connect to like our inner selves and our unconscious. They're a gateway, and we're always constantly developing. And so Freud was like, you're nuts. And Jung was like, I can't even talk to you anymore. And they had this big breakup. Yeah.
You know, and the truth of it is there was probably some accuracy in both of their
right. But they wanted to Freud was a very absolute type of guy.
Yeah. So, you know, the older I get, the more more my understanding kind of expands. I realize that I don't think there's so much black and white, right? I mean, I think there's a little bit of a truth in everything, you know, and so I've kind of looked at a lot of world religions being on a spiritual path, right? I mean, I just superficially look at it. I'm very eclectic. So I'll sample some things, and if it fits, I take a piece out of that. And I'm like, yeah, and then, you know, I might chase that down a rabbit hole. But whatever the book and doctrine, right? I mean, it comes down to like three or four basic principles for all the world religions.
It's true. I've done the same thing. I went through a thing where I like looked so much stuff up, and then I finally was like, it's all the same.
Right. So I you know, and I don't know, me being the mystic, I think people tend to overcomplicate things, right? So, So here's these three things that's in agreement with every other major world religion, but now we have to make ourselves special, right? And so we have to do this, and we have to do this on this day, and then we have this ritual, and we have to do this, and we believe.
Yes.
It creates a separation when we could all just agree to these three or four, whatever, right? Common principles. Probably should be kind, and you probably shouldn't kill people. You know what I mean?
Right. Like love each other and don't be a dick. That's basically what it comes down to. Yeah.
I mean, treat others like you would like to be treated. If we could just stop right there, goodness, there's no more wars. There's no, you know, it's, I
know, I do.
Yeah. I don't know. That's what mysticism is to me, at least, you know, in the West is I keep trying to reduce to the common denominator, right? I don't.
Well, yeah. And so I love that you like, I'm just going to say had the courage to go into this journey on your own, because digging into your shadow can be scary as shit. Like there is a lot of stuff in there that you may not want to see. So it takes some courage. So that's awesome. And I know like we talked about the archetype of the addict and how you transformed that. Right. And from what we've chatted about before, I know the biggest part of that transformation was moving into making drums, right?
Well, so my spiritual awakening was pretty, it was traumatic, right?
And it
it
is for most people. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I was divorced, and I was living with my mom. She was helping me take care of the kids. And then like, I kind of spiraled out of control on the drugs, and the kids were getting older, and it was just a bad time. But they came and they took them into custody, right? And so they took them away from me. And I up until that point, if you would have asked me to describe James Ditty, I would have said a lot of things. But there were a few things that I thought I had figured out, right? Like I thought I was a good father, and I thought I had my shit together on certain things. And then, so when all that came crumbling down, I realized, I don't know anything anymore. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I say it was like coming face to face with myself in a dark alley, and only one of us was getting out. Right.
Right.
So I've never been much of a hypocrite. I could have pretended and kept going and tried to keep up the facade, but I just let it go. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I truly don't know shit about anything. And so I just started off from there. So for me, all the other stuff coming, like the shadow work, the thing I was most afraid of had already happened to me. Right. And so you can move forward in a relatively fearless way if you know, because I've never really harbored a lot of fear anyway. I just I was sort of reckless and impulsive, right? And
well, you were a flight medic. I don't think that if you had a lot of fear, that would have worked out well for you.
Yeah, no, no, and I was, you know, my shadow was very good for me for that, because I mean, when it all started going to hell in a handbasket, I would just kind of lock down, and I'd get real, and like I was, you know. And years later in therapy, they told me that was compartmentalization. I shouldn't do it. I was like, you know what? That's what made me as good as I was.
Yeah.
Because I would lock in and think, you know, like you lock in and now things are moving in slow motion, like you're hyper alert.
I completely know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
And, you know, so I don't know if that's bad. Does that cause PTSD? I don't know. But I knew it was absolutely a tool.
It is literally the exact topic that I am doing research on right now that I'll be presenting in Italy in a month and a half.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Literally, that is, I'm looking at dissociation and compartmentalization in first responders. And I don't think compartmentalization is a bad thing. But if you don't do the work to reintegrate the parts that you've compartmentalized,
right,
then they get absorbed by the unconscious and become shadow elements, right? And that is dissociation, and that can lead to unhealthy things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, and you're probably right with that, because I, you know, years later, I realized I was compartmentalizing, but sometimes it's like have something else to do and I don't have time to process or feel this. So this goes in a box, it goes in a room.
You got to do, I mean, compartmentalization is a necessary skill for first responders. Like for you to be able to do your job, like absolutely. It's what happens after that is the important piece that gets left out.
Sometimes you got to open that closet door and let everything out. Right. And so, you know, I mean, I probably still do that to a degree now. Right. It's like, well, I can't, I'm not dealing with this right now. So I'll just let this run a little aside. Right. Just gonna run over here and that.
Got to remember where you lock it up, and you got to go back and get it later.
Yeah, it's it's psychological and energetic housekeeping, right? Like,
yes, exactly.
Just dust the bookshelf.
Exactly.
That too, right? Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of time left, so I just want to move a little bit into like where your journey has taken you and what you're doing nowadays, because I know you have a pretty awesome practice.
Well, yeah, it's you know, everything I do pretty much is been a reflection of where I'm at in my path on that spiritual arc. So, you know, I kind of went through that awakening, and I had all this esoteric knowledge that I don't really know how I knew, and I still don't, but I don't question it much, because like I know what I know, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was doing energy work, and then I don't know, I kind of I started making drums because I wanted to have that sort of out of body experience that I'd had with astral traveling and that sort of stuff. To have that, and I started making those drums, and as an energy worker, like I'm, you know, I think every artist puts a little bit of energy and a little bit of themselves into it.
Oh, sure.
But you know, I really started kind of consciously manipulating that, and you know, doing some spiritual work and attaching drum spirits to the drums, and then that was good for a while. And then I made my drum, and it's like, okay, so I still make them, but I don't feel the same way about it. And then I had some visions for healing ceremonies.
So wait. How many drums did you make before you finally made yours?
So my belief is I'm probably around 450, maybe a little more. But I made mine. I didn't make any through 2020 with COVID. Mm-hmm. I made mine Halloween 2020. So I was probably 300 drums in before I actually made mine.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
You think it's part of your process?
I was refining. My work just got better and better, right? And
Yeah.
as far as the pieces to make a drum, it's just the pieces, right? I mean, a drum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I was doing mine in a ceremony, and I was making them in a spiritual way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that process was refined as my understanding deepened, and as I expanded into that kind of understanding, then I think when you sort of integrate all this, and I believe that I've hit a new way of being, right? And so some people try to do until they be and back into it, but I don't think it's I don't think that really works that well. I think, but once you hit a state of being, then everything you do reflects that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
and so let me ask, because I have a few musical instruments, and then of course just all kinds of rocks and things that that I just know belong to me. And so I'm wondering, like with your drum, as you were making it, did you just have that feeling where you're like, okay, this one's mine. This one belongs to me.
Yeah. So I actually, now when I do those kind of custom creations, or where I see one, like I'll see it in a vision.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see it. And then I just know that like I have to make it this way, or I'll have that understanding that it needs to be made on a certain day or whatever. That one was a year after my mom passed away in October 2019.
Hmm.
So Halloween, All Saints Day, All Souls Day. There's a whole bunch of different faiths that look at that day as being as the veil being thin, right?
Sure, sure, yeah.
Which the flip side of that is it's thin on the other side too in the spring, but like we never talk about that balance thing. And so I just made it. I hadn't made one. And I said, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make one. I looked 2 years to find a perfect Y out of a tree branch, right? And
Yeah.
I perfect Y, but I found as close to a perfect Y as you can get from tree limbs that fall down. It took 2 years to find that, a year to dry it, and so I put that in the back. And yeah, it was just picking up little things. There's a walnut tree. We had walnut trees on the farm when I was a kid. That whole sort of sacredness, and it really is what's relevant to you, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a beautiful process because you're honoring all of the energetic intention behind it.
Right.
There's no rush. Yeah.
It's
So I know we had talked about like you still have some drums that you sell, and then you do like personalized creations for people. Like people request you to make them. Okay.
I'm doing custom orders now.
Okay.
Because I made a lot of drums and I sold them, and I don't know. I mean, is my practice enriched? Is my work enriched? I was not okay with like the impulse buyers coming by and just
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I had to do a little apology to a whole bunch of drums that I made that I'm sure are sitting in somebody's closet with a pair of tennis shoes on top of them.
I completely understand.
And
Yeah.
now it's and I did some shows where I was trying to sell drums, but I'd already put that out there. So, I'd do an event in St. Louis where I'd normally sell 30 to 40 drums, and I sold 2, but it was a good 2
Because it's like, are you going to love it? Are you going to take care of it?
yeah, no, they came there to get my work because they like that's what they wanted. Like they wanted mine, right?
Right, right.
And so that's a good place to be in, right? And I don't. I mean, I struggle with that, like trying to do the metaphysical fairs and do the thing that I love and make it pay the bills, and I couldn't rectify that. So I've got a square job now that pays my bills, and now I can do the work I do with a pretty clean heart.
Yeah.
I still do a few events because I'm doing shamanic healing work. I really like that, right? So I saw those ceremonies in vision. I saw 3 ceremonies, and I wasn't smart enough to figure out which one to do when. So I just strung them all together, and that's what I do, right?
Right on. Well, and I like that you don't put up any pretenses about it. It's like you're very clear about who you are and what you do and what you offer. And I think that that's rare in our day and age. Like, there's so many people who are like, well, and I have this cert and this cert and this cert and that cert, and I can do this, and I've been trained by that and trained by this. but not a lot of people just take the time to do their own work and develop their practice and and what they teach.
Well, again, where I'm at, a reflection on I've been on my path now close to 20 years, right? So 20 years I've been trying to reduce and simplify and oversimplify and reduce and try to, because they call it the mystery, right? Like, and so I'm a student of the mystery, and you can't solve it. I mean, you can't solve it. You can just understand it or know it, right? And so that's where I'm at, and because I've had people ask me, they get on my table, what to do, what's that going to do, and I don't, I try not to hijack their experience, right?
Right.
I think at some point, the healing work I do, it really is to borrow a term from some indigenous healers, it really is a hollow bone approach, right? So I just try to remove my ego and just become that awareness, right? And I don't really ask questions. I just, if I get that urge to put a hand here and a hand here and pass energy between the two, then that's what I do. And then, like, these folks have experiences. That's great. And I love when they tell me, but person A's experience is not going to be person B's experience.
Right. They're all unique. Yeah.
Right. And so I think, I try to honor that sacredness in them, right? Like, I don't ever see a client get on my table. I don't look at them as broken, right? I mean, as a responsible co-creator, right? And understanding the power of consciousness, I'm going to create them in the best way possible. I'm not, and as you go in that awakening, they used to talk about that, about be mindful of your thoughts, right? Because your thoughts project energy,
we share a very similar vocabulary, James. Just earlier today, some random dude, when I was out to lunch, butted in on my conversation and was like, "Oh, I'm a healer too," and started telling me about all the people he's saving and fixing. And I was like, "No." I was like, people are not broken and they don't need you to save them.
Right. Yeah.
They need to be empowered by you, and it's about holding space for them to be the best possible version they can be. And he was just like, "Yeah, but TikTok." And I was like, "Meh." So I've appreciated our time together, James, so much, because like I said, we share a very similar way of looking at the world, and I appreciate that a lot. But we are at time. So one last question for you. If there was one thing you wanted to tell everyone listening or watching, what would that be?
Oh. So I currently have found 2 universal truths that I would like to share with people, right?
Sure. Yeah, please.
The first being, nobody's going to come save you. Nobody will save you but you. Yeah. And the second truth would be, you have to put in the work.
Right. Yes.
And that's it, And so I think if you really lean into that, you realize it sort of takes your power back, right? So that's an embodiment. Like, it's you. It's, lots of things can happen to you, right? Somebody can be upset around you. You can't control what other people do, but how you feel, how you act, and how you respond, that's 100% you. That's one.
Absolutely.
And so you can kind of step into that creatorship, right? You get to decide if you have a bad day or not. Right. Difficult things will happen. How you respond to them is how you create the day, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. So yeah, I would like to see people take ownership and take their power back, right?
Hell yeah. Absolutely. If you were here, I'd give you a high five. Oh my God, that's awesome. Well, James, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And to everyone watching, I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us on the Energetic Psyche, a weekly podcast that live streams every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll join us again. Have a great week.